911 emergency.
You need help here, Toys R Us.
Okay, what's going on?
I don't know. He was shot.
He was shot?
I don't know.
At Toys R Us? Is he inside?
Yes.
In the middle of an overnight shift at a former popular retail store, a manager would be brutally murdered. Inside were only 4 employees, locked in the building. Was one of them responsible for his murder? Who killed Larry Wells? Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Larry Wells. Viewer discretion is advised. I'm sure many of us have very fond memories of Toys R Us, or TRU as I call it, because I used to work there. To some of us old enough to remember, going into a TRU as a kid was almost like going to a theme park. It was like a really special, cool day. You got to play with all the toys. Even if you didn't get anything, you just got to play with a bunch of crap. For me personally, TRU was the very first job I ever had, and I was there for nearly 3 years. Sadly, all that remains now of Toys R Us are the memories, and in some cases, emptied, abandoned buildings. This case takes us to the town of Hamburg, New York, and it's a little out of the ways of Buffalo. The night was June 29th, 2013, or technically it was the morning. 35-year-old Larry Wells was one of the assistant managers at the Hamburg, New York Toys R Us, and he was going in there that morning to manage the overnight stocking crew. Larry was born on September 22nd, 1997 in Dunkirk, New York. He was a graduate of Pine Valley Central School in 1996. Then he went on to graduate from SUNY at Fredonia with a bachelor's in science in elementary education. And this happened in 2000. He would then go on to teach in the Frontier and also in the Hamburg school districts. On July 31st, 2004, he would marry the absolute love of his life, the wonderful Jill. They were just one of those couples that everyone aspired to be. They just seemed to be perfect. Very quickly, they would go on to have a baby girl. By 2006, Larry would get himself a job at Toys R Us. And then over the next few years, he would rise up the ranks and he would eventually become an assistant manager. I don't know if he was also teaching at the same time. I'm unclear about that. Or if he gave up teaching, I'm not sure. But at Toys R Us, he was described as like the best manager you could want because he would allow for the staff to have fun and goof around and play with the toys as long as everything was getting done in a timely fashion. He was an extremely friendly guy, and he was just loved by literally every person he ever came into contact with. No one could say a bad thing about the guy. He didn't seem to have a mean bone in his body. He was just universally loved, is basically the term people would use. In terms of a husband and father, no one could ask for a better one. His daughter adored him to pieces, which makes what would end up happening to Larry just so extremely baffling. Larry was managing the overnight crew on June 29th, 2013. This crew was responsible for putting away all of the freight that would come in. And this is something that I'm near and dear to because when I started working at Toys R Us the first year and a half or so, I did the overnight stocking thing. So, that crew, they're unboxing hundreds, if not sometimes thousands of boxes that came off massive trucks. Boxes just full of toys and products to then was their responsibility to put on the shelves. This is a way easier thing to do overnight, or at least in the very, very early mornings, while there's no customers in the store and the doors are locked because you don't have any distractions and you can just get the stuff done. So, Larry uses his keys to enter this particular Toys R Us at approximately 3:55 a.m. When he gets there to open the door, two of his employees are already there waiting for him. Their names are Isaac and Cindy. The three of them walk into the building. Larry turns around. He locks the door. They leave a walkie outside the door so that when the next person comes, they can just radio in like, hey, I'm here, and then they can go up and open the door for them. Everyone clocks in. They put their lunches away. They grab a walkie-talkie, hook it onto their belts, and they proceed to start work. They would start by dropping several pallets worth of products onto the floor from the receiving area. They began opening up boxes and putting shit away. Larry was a very hands-on manager. He was not the type of person to just sit in the office, twiddle his thumbs, and bark orders at the peons to, get work done and blah, blah, blah. He was out there working with them. He would just, he would rip open boxes and get his hands dirty, and he was just part of the crew. And this particular crew was considered a very tight-knit group. They've been working together for quite some time. At 4:53 a.m., another employee by the name of Anthony would pick up the walkie from outside the door, and he would radio Larry to come open the door. Less than a minute later, Larry is up there, opens the door, lets Anthony in, and then they go their separate ways so that Anthony can clock in and do his thing. Just 7 minutes later, at 5 a.m., another employee by the name of Richard, he also goes to the door, picks up the walkie, radios Larry to come open the door. Larry doesn't respond. So Richard waits another minute or two, nothing. So what he then does, and by the way, this is one of those Toys R Us, Babies R Us hybrid, where like a Toys R Us has an entrance, the Babies R Us has an entrance, but it's all one big store. So Richard decides, well, maybe I'll go over to the BRU door, and he notices it's not only unlocked, but it's partially opened, which is very unusual because that is not supposed to be the case. And no one ever comes in that door for, the overnight crew, but he figured I might as well try this door. And so he just thought it was very odd that it was already open, but he went in, clocked in, he started doing his thing. Now, at this point, all of the employees, and there's 4 regular employees, and then of course you have Larry, who's the manager, but the 4 regular employees are all out on the floor working freight, but they are not working together as a group. What they usually do is they split off into their own departments, and they're putting products away from the department they're assigned to. So none of them are within eyesight of each other. Then at 5:45 a.m., a loud alarm begins ringing throughout the store. One of the employees takes his walkie and says, "Hey, Larry, an alarm is going off. Can you make it stop?" Nothing. They get no response. "Larry, are you there? There's an alarm going off. We need it to stop. It's really annoying." Time goes by, no response. They figure, maybe Larry's he maybe went into the manager's office for a minute, and maybe he put his walkie down somewhere. So Cindy, who was the closest to the manager's office, decides she'll go walk up to the office and see if he's in there. She approaches the door, she opens it, and then moments later, you can hear Cindy screaming throughout the entire store.
911 emergency.
Can you help your Toys R Us?
Okay, what's going on?
I don't know. He was shot.
He was shot?
I don't know.
At Toys R Us? Is he inside?
Yes.
Is there anybody else there?
Yes, I have 2 other guys with me.
And where was the manager when this
They
happened?
must have let somebody in.
Okay, is he alive?
I don't know if he's alive.
That was the actual 911 call that Cindy made, because when she walked into the manager's office, she saw Larry sitting in the chair but slumped over onto his desk, and he was just in a pool of blood. There was then a pool of blood all on the ground. There were like streaks of blood as if maybe he was trying to move. There was a baseball hat on the ground kind of near the blood that Cindy didn't recognize. The phone on his desk was off the hook and hanging over the desk. There were like some signs of a possible struggle having taken place. Now, Cindy made the assumption that Larry was shot, but the issue there is no one heard a gunshot, because when she called 911 and she said that he had been probably shot, police had to approach this very cautiously. They had to take this as an active shooter situation. They approach the building with caution. They see the 4 employees kind of near the front. They manage to get them out of the building safely. And then they kind of have a SWAT team arrive and they surround the building. They then enter the building and they go from like every area to every area of the store, and they're able to clear it, and that there is now no longer anyone else in the building. When they finally get into the manager's office to inspect the crime scene, they don't find any murder weapon, no knife, no gun, nothing. And they also notice that Larry was actually still alive. His breathing was very labored, but he was still there. So an ambulance is obviously there, and they try to rush him to the hospital, but unfortunately, Larry dies in the ambulance ride to the hospital. You know, it just baffled everyone as to who would have done this to someone like Larry. Larry, you know, his daughter at the time was 4 years old, and his wife was several months pregnant. Everything was going so wonderfully for him and his family. And this just came as a complete shock to everyone, the whole community, just everyone. They were able to discern that Larry was not actually shot. He had been stabbed several times. Obviously, police begin investigating right away. They take the 4 employees from the building. They split them up. They question each one of them in a different police car, because after all, these are the 4 employees who were locked in this locked building with the man who would end up being murdered. So one of the 4 of them had to be the killer, right? Around the time of the murder, none of the 4 employees were within each other's eyesight, so none of them could account for exactly where the other one was during this, short window of time. They all gave their accounts of what happened, that night, their whole like beginning to end. Police would say that one of them seemed super, super nervous when being questioned, so that raised a red flag to them. They also looked at Cindy as like, well, she is the one who found him. So they always have to look at the person who found the body with a little bit more emphasis, because sometimes that's the person who did it. They also found out that one of the employees, Richard, was very late to work. And so police were like, well, does that have anything to do with the murder, the fact that this guy was late? Basically, they would find out that he had gone to a convenience store just before work to get some snacks to get through the workday, which police were able to confirm that he was there at the convenience store, blah, blah, blah. But the line was just taking forever, so that's why he arrived at work late. Richard did give them some, valuable information that when he got there at 5, Larry didn't come up to open the door, and so he had to go to the Babies R Us side where the door was already open, which is not something that's supposed to be a thing. That door is supposed to be locked at all times. They found out that Anthony arrived at 4:53 a.m., and so he physically saw Larry. So sometime between 4:53 a.m. and 5:45 a.m. when they found his body, that is the window of time you're looking at. And, Anthony, like the last person to see him alive, maybe he did it. Detectives, of course, processed the crime scene. They dusted for fingerprints. They checked for, all sorts of DNA, for hair samples, anything they could find. And there really, other than Larry's blood, there really wasn't a whole lot. With the exception of one thing, they found a hat on the ground next to the pools of blood. It was a 2007 University of Florida Gators hat, and that certainly did not belong to Larry because he had no connection to that school or team. He was a New York sports fan all the way. It also did not, according to the 4 employees, it did not belong to any of them. They would swab the inside of the hat because maybe it had DNA on it, and they would come to find out that it did, and that DNA did not match Larry, so they were able to rule him out. But they did plug it into the system to see if it matched anyone already in the system, but that would take some time. While they waited for that, they wanted to look at any possible CCTV footage because they noticed that in the office with Larry was a DVR for a CCTV system, but the DVR was unplugged. which means that either it's never been plugged in or someone unplugged it, possibly that night. So they also swab the power cord for any kind of touch DNA to see if that comes back to anything. Eventually, that does come back with touch DNA. That touch DNA would actually match the same DNA that was found inside of the hat. But again, it's not matching anyone as of right now. Luckily for police, the regional loss prevention person for Toys R Us in that area, he was there. And so because of this being like, a murder happening in a Toys R Us building, obviously this is a major security issue, so LP is going to be involved. So because he is there, he is able to help with pulling up the footage. And this man's name is Bernard Grusha. Thankfully, Bernard is able to pull up CCTV footage from that night, which means that it was unplugged probably by the killer. At approximately 4:24 a.m., they see a person approaching the front door of the Babies R Us, and he appears, or she appears, to be in some kind of disguise. This person opens the Babies R Us door without any struggle, so it appears they actually had a set of keys to enter the building. The person's face is covered completely. They're wearing a hat. They have like a scarf or something around their neck. You can't even see, they're completely covered up, so you can't even tell what the person's, skin color is. You see them walk around the store in a very sneaky, very lurky, creepy kind of way, kind of bouncing around, trying to hide. So they're obviously trying to not be seen by the people already in the building. And it appears that this person has a very specific goal in mind. They're trying to get somewhere in that building. At 4:32 a.m., you can see them approaching the manager's office door. And in their hand, you can see what very clearly looks like a butcher's knife. And then that person enters the manager's office at 4:32 a.m., closes the door, and apparently just sits there and waits. At 4:39 a.m., the footage cuts to black. So this is obviously when the person decided to unplug it. When you look closer at the person, you can see that they're wearing a hat, and it appears to be the exact same hat that was seen or found in the manager's office in the crime scene. This is the person who murdered Larry. Oh, taking a pause real quick for a Molly break. Molly, say hi. Yes, a good girl. Say hi to everyone. Hello. I'm not looking at little ears perk up. Mama? Treats? Boogers? Treats? Bugs? Lizards? Are you a brat? Yeah, you're a brat. All right, get out of here, scamp. The other 4 employees who were there that night are then asked to provide their DNA, which they all willingly provide. That is then ran against the DNA found in the hat and also on the power cord. It takes a few weeks, but they are able to confirm that the DNA does not match any of those 4 people. So it appears that the 4 of them are actually in the clear. Now Riley wants to say hi, and Roxy's saying hi. Hello. Oh, God. So then they test 43 other employees or former employees as well of that Toys R Us. They're talking about people who may have been fired recently, maybe people who were fired possibly by Larry, maybe they had a grudge. And this also, takes a lot of time, but all 43 of those people are also completely ruled out. So was this random? Was this somehow a random attack? That can't be, because the person had keys to get inside the building. So this is just very bizarre. Police then bring in hundreds of people to interview. They question current employees, former employees, corporate employees. They also question people who just are in Larry's life outside of work, neighbors, friends, family. The majority of them, almost all of them, provide nothing of substance in terms of getting a lead on who might have killed Larry. Police would actually end up getting a tip from someone who they weren't interviewing, just some person who lived in the neighborhood kind of behind the Toys R Us. They said that at approximately 1 o'clock in the morning, the morning of the murder, They saw a black Chevy Impala parked on the side parking lot of the TRU-BRU building, which is very unusual because that's not where employees ever parked. No one ever parked there. It was always just very empty. So it just seemed odd that this car was parked there on the night someone was killed. The witness did not see who the driver was. They didn't get a license plate because at that time they weren't thinking like anything was odd. They only thought it was odd until after they found out about the murder. None of the employees, former or current, drove a Chevy Impala, so it wasn't any of their cars. And then a man's name comes to police's attention, and his name is Patrick Walden. Patrick had recently been released from jail. He just so happened to be the son of a Toys R Us manager. Is it possible that this guy stole the keys from this person to get in the building to possibly rob the place? So what they do, police, is they begin to kind of follow him around. They do some surveillance on him. And at one point they notice he flicks a cigarette, and they find that exact cigarette and they take it back to the lab. They process it for his DNA. They then begin to compare it against the DNA from the hat and from the power cord. And it's not a match. It's not him. Damn it. All right, back to square one. Now we're about 2 months later. People in the community are terrified because this is like a small community and there's this lunatic apparently on the loose. People, especially people who worked in retail, were petrified of going to work. They would leave work and go into the building with always in pairs or groups. They would never work outside of someone's like eye line anymore. Like it was just a very paranoid time frame, which I totally understand because I would probably be the same exact way. Okay, so police then go back to the beginning. Let's start from scratch, right? So as they're doing all of that, they're going through the list of people whose DNA they collected. They noticed that there was one person's DNA that wasn't collected. A person they were trying to get DNA from, but this person's always making excuses. That person is Bernard Grusha. Remember him? The LP guy? He was the guy who helped pull up the CCTV footage that helped him, get the footage they needed of the killer. He was also helping along the investigation with anything they had questions about. Certainly this guy can't be a killer, but why didn't he provide his DNA? So police call him and say, hey, we need to get your DNA real quick just to rule you out. And he's like, I'm on vacation. I'm so sorry. When I get back, they call him like a week or so later. I'm sorry, my son has like a baseball tournament going on right now. So let's wait till after that's all done and then, we'll do it. So police are like, no, we're not playing this game. So they one day drive without any kind of announcement or warning. They drive to Bernard's father's house because that's where he is that day. And they say, hey, Bernie, we're here to collect your DNA now. It takes 20 seconds, bud. So, we just want to rule you out. So he's like, okay. And so they swab him, and they now have his DNA. They run his DNA against the hat, against the power cord. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a match. Larry's killer was Bernard Grusha, his friend and regional LP person for Toys R Us. Police then go to Bernard's house in October of 2013 and interview him, and they confront him about the DNA information. So here is segments from that.
Power cord was pulled. Do you know whose DNA was found on that end of the power cord?
Who's mine?
Ernest.
Well, I'm not surprised. I mean, I work with it.
But, do you know whose DNA was found on the hat?
I saw the hat that morning.
You weren't in that.
That's what I said.
The hat wasn't there.
Whatever, guys.
Okay, Bernie.
Great. I didn't do it.
Because the only way you got
I don't know
there
how it could be.
because you had it on when you were there in the office.
I don't know I didn't do it. As bad as whatever you guys have looks or whatever, I didn't do
We're
it.
past the point about who did it. We know who did it.
I gotta get my dogs to the appointment at 10 o'clock.
Well, your dogs can wait.
Not taking the dogs to the vet for.
I have nothing else to say. I didn't do this, so I need to say I want a lawyer, and that's gonna shut you guys up.
No.
What?
James, I got your hair.
You arresting me?
Yes.
Are you serious?
Yep.
As you can see, they arrested Bernard and they charged him with the murder of Larry Wells. Okay, so they know who did it, but why did he do it? Why would you kill someone like Larry? What did he do to deserve this? Well, apparently that wasn't even the plan. Bernard snuck into the store that night to steal some stuff. You see, when police searched Bernard's home, they found just a crap ton of products, like unopened products like video game consoles, video games, a whole bunch of very expensive toys, you know, just you name it. It all appeared to have come from Toys R Us. And the amount of stuff that he had would equal out to be somewhere around $200,000. Bernard was using his position as the regional loss prevention person to sneak into stores because he was allowed to have keys. You see, good old Bernie boy was broke. He was living way beyond his means. He had this huge house, but how on earth could he pay for it? I mean, his job paid him decently, but not enough to support the living he was living. So, on the very early morning hours of that June 2013 morning, Bernard would drive his rental car, a black Chevy Impala, to the Toys R Us building. He then parked on the side of the building where he knew no one parked so that no one would see him, and he waited. I don't know if you could hear that, but that's Molly being a demon dog. At any rate, Bernard sat there and waited until he saw a manager approach the building, because Bernard doesn't have any codes to stop the alarms from going off. So he would need a manager to go in first to do that. But he did have keys at least to enter the building. So he then saw Larry and everyone go in. He waited a little bit longer, and then he entered the building, shortly before 4:30 a.m. He then lurked like a freaking creeper around the building, and he then made his way to the manager's office with a butcher's knife, where he then closed the door and he waited for Larry to finally come in. He wore a disguise because his plan was to rob the store of money from the safe, but he would need the manager to open the safe, but he didn't want the manager to recognize him, so that's why he wore the crazy disguise. When Larry entered sometime after 4:53 a.m., basically, he was held up at knife point, but Larry, they said he was a previous football player, and they said that he was like a really strong guy. And they said he wasn't going to put up with this, so a fight broke out, which then led to Bernard stabbing him multiple times until he had slumped over in a pool of blood. Bernard did not get any cash. He didn't get any products. He ran out of the building through an emergency exit, which is what caused that alarm to go off. And then he fled in his car. Bernard would end up taking a plea deal. He would end up taking manslaughter as long as he admitted to the crime, and he did. He confessed to doing it, and because it was manslaughter, he only got 25 years in prison, and without parole. Not 25 to life, 25 solid. Once again, a man is allowed to murder someone and take away the rest of that person's life, but they get to spend some time locked up, but then they get to enjoy the rest of their life after they've served that time. Gotta love it. Yeah. But that is it for this case, folks. I hope you found it interesting. I don't want to grow up. I'm a Toys R Us kid. There's a million toys at Toys R Us that I can play with. From books and trains to video games. I don't remember all the words. We used to have the music playing, on the intercom, and they would play like 1,000 variations of the Toys R Us song. They would have a country version, a rap version, a rock and roll version, like a Disney version. Oh, God, it was annoying. Oh, man. It was on a loop, too, so it's probably why I do what I do now, talking about murders. All right, so if you want to see some shorter form cases from me, as usual, you can head on over to my TikTok page. I'm not posting any new crime content there anymore, but I do have well over 2,000 videos there with a whole bunch of other cases that you can watch. So you can give me a follow if you like. It'll be in the description below. Secondly, if you want to have me cover a case, you can email me that case at makingatruecrimerer.com. That'll be listed below. Please make sure you check my case list first, though. If you go to my link tree, which is just below in the description, you'll see crimerer case list. You can scroll through the list, or you can search it to find a name. If you don't see that name, then email me the name, when it happened, where it happened. Fucking A. And I can add it to my list. Oh, jeez, that's criminy. These dogs are crazy. Please don't send me a duplicate name, though. That's already on the list. It drives me cuckoo, cuckoo, wackadoo. Lastly, if you want to support me in any way, the dogs are now getting rowdy, you can go to my merch store, which is also in the link tree below. We sell t-shirts, we sell hoodies, mugs, and a wine glass, and Christmas ornaments for your Christmas tree. Get them while they're hot or cold or whatever. Yeah, so you can go ahead and do that in the link tree below. Awesome. Neat. Also, if you want to join our Discord, I do have a Discord that's also linked below. It's there if you want to join it. Please be over the age of 18. Otherwise, you will be kicked out. Yeah. All right. So that is it for this one, True Crime Aroonies. Until the next case. What? Get out of here. Get. You get. I don't love you anymore. Get out of here.